Welcome back to Crunch Labs. I'm Mark Rober, and today we're going to be talking about the duck game and all the juicy engineering physics that go with it. So if you just got the box and you haven't opened it yet, this is basically how it works. It's kind of like the duck game at the Carnival. So you can just turn it on, and of course, if you don't do anything, the ducks are just going to come around and just loop like this. But in the box comes these party blowers, and if you're successful at hitting the duck, then it in turn hits this little counter, and this is how you keep score. Now what's cool is you get two party blowers, and this can either be a one-person game and you kind of keep score, or you make it two-player and you go from either side. And of course this little clever marble counter will keep the score on each side. We'll talk about it a little later, but you can imagine you don't always just have to use a party blower. This is an amazing target for anything that you want to shoot at it and to keep score at the same time. And the engineering principle for today is belts, and this is one of those tricks engineers use a lot. It's one of those things that once you see it, you can't unsee it. So let's jump right in, of course, starting first with the question of the day. And that question is, how do you turn a corner with a conveyor belt? I'm not going to go to the left this time. Hey, at least I went right. All right, well, what do I even mean by this question? A conveyor belt is like, you know, at the airport when you get your luggage and it comes out and it's coming along. That's a conveyor belt. I've kind of drawn it here. It's basically a belt. You have stuff on it. There's a motor here that spins, and then the stuff moves the speed that the motor turns. And if it's in a straight line like that, that's pretty obvious. You just spin this wheel at the speed you want the stuff here to move. But how do you do it when you get to a corner? And there's a couple different ways to do this. Here's one example. You've probably seen these at the airport. You have these vertical slats, and they're all parallel, but then when it gets to the corner, they kind of overlap a bit. Here's another example. You've got these rolly wheels, and then when you get to the corner, they sort of fan out a little bit, so it's able to keep things moving as it moves around that corner. But what about this one? You'll notice it's a flat belt that's turning the corner like that. You'll also notice there's a kid riding along that baggage conveyor belt. You should never do that. That is very dangerous, but I am a little jealous because I've always wanted to take a little trip by riding around that thing. Here's another example that shows it a little clearer. It's like these little sticks of butter, and in the straight sections, I totally get it. You've got rollers on the end, just like this. And if you spin it, the stuff moves the speed the roller spins, right? But when you go around the corner, if you think about it, the sticks of butter on the inside are moving slower than the sticks of butter on the outside. And by the way, it's like if this is a merry-go-round, something that's spinning around, right? If you're on the outside, you're actually going faster, and it feels faster than if you go more towards the middle. And that's because in the same amount of time, one rotation, you travel a greater distance. So you are going faster. So what the heck does the roller look like on that curve? Because like this part of the belt is moving slower than this part. Somehow this is moving faster, but it's like a rigid object. So how the heck does that work? What does the roller look like such that these could move at different speeds? And then the middle, by the way, is like the average of those two speeds. So that's the question of the day. We'll loop back at the end. By the way, this is a very advanced question of the day. I mean, this is like college level physics question. So if it doesn't make total sense to you yet, we'll loop back to it. But if you even understand and get the solution here, you are like bonkers level smart. All right, well, let's talk about belts then. And probably the first time you heard the word belt, like this here is a belt that, you know, can keep your pants up. That's very useful to have a belt to do that. But beyond the belt that you just wear every day, there's a lot of other useful ways you can use a belt. So for example, before we talked about gears, and what's really cool about gears is I can have a motor represented right here. And if I spin this way over here, something happens, right? Because I have all these gears in a line. But gosh darn it, that's kind of expensive because I have to use all of these gears and they all have a little bit of friction, and that's not very efficient. If only there was another way to have my same motor here where I could make something spin way the heck over there. Well, there is, and that's where our belt comes into play, right? So I've got this little belt right here that in this case I just made out of tape. When I spin this, lo and behold, my gear over there is spinning. But you can see this would be way less expensive and just a lot more simple than using all these gears. Another good thing is it tolerates misalignment. So this could be way down here and it's still spinning, whereas if I turn this, these gears can easily sort of get jammed up if they're not at the perfect distance from one another. Whereas this belt, it kind of doesn't matter. It's just going to spin really well. And I've used belts quite a few times in my videos. So for example, with the Dominator, with Dom for the Domino robot, we had the motors up here, but the wheels we wanted to spin were down here. It just made way more sense to mount the motors up here. It was a lot more convenient. And then this belt transferred the energy from the motor down into the wheels so we could spin around and do these cool tricks. For the original Squirrel obstacle course, the pitchfork tumblers, you don't see it, but on the back there, the reason those are spinning together at the same speed is because there's one motor and then there's a belt that connects the two. In a car engine, you have this belt right here. That's called a timing belt. It keeps everything moving at the same time. Or maybe you've seen a fan installation like this that I love, where there's a single motor and then all the ceiling fans in the whole restaurant are moving by that one motor because they're all connected by belts. So that's one set of examples of when you would use a belt as an engineer. But another one is when you want to move a bunch of things more efficiently. So in the video where we collected all the trash from the river and there was that robot that ate the trash, after it collected it, it moved it up a conveyor belt like this into a dumpster. You can imagine that would be a lot harder if you individually had like a robot arm picking out the trash one at a time. A belt just efficiently moves it all up all at once. Also on the Domino robot, we use belts to kind of move the dominoes from down lower up higher so that the arm could place them one at a time into the whole loading mechanism. Like we said before, you see these at the airport as it brings your luggage around. It's like a conveyor belt. You see these a ton in factory machinery, like we showed earlier. There's a real famous scene from I Love Lucy where there's like chocolates coming down the conveyor belt and they have to like eat them all. How about a people belt? What's a belt that moves people? Well, again, at the airport, you have those moving walkways, so if you're in a hurry, you can walk a little bit faster. I love those because it feels like you have like superpowers and you can like walk super fast. That's just a belt that moves around so you can move more quicker. Or even an escalator. That's like a belt for people that goes from one floor to the other. And you might be like, no, those are just stairs. But actually, if you peeled it away and did a cross section and looked from the outside, those stairs just loop back around over and over again like a belt as they kind of fold down and go underneath. That's the part you don't see. Some other fun examples are there's these sushi restaurants that basically you pay for every plate that you take. So whatever you like, you just take it off this little belt. And then at the end, when you need to pay, you just hand them your plates and they count up how many plates you took. One final example for where belts are super useful is on a 3D printer. A lot of times, the way this head moves back and forth and the plate itself moves in and out is from a belt. There's a little motor there on the end, and the underside of this belt has little teeth on it. So basically, as the motor turns with the little gear on it, it moves the belt, and then that moves the head back and forth, exactly where you want it to go, super precisely. And then the final class of category where belts are useful are in things like a snowmobile, right? You have a belt here on the bottom. Why? Because that just gives you really good traction across this whole surface, right? So that belt just goes over and over. You can imagine how this is better than like wheels if you're trying to go through snow. Same with like machinery or like tanks. When you're going through mud and really awkward terrain that's not a smooth road, a belt is super useful because you get full traction. And it'll just make sure you don't get stuck there in the mud. One other one, which we used a lot when we're making prototypes on the Crunch Labs boxes, I use a lot in my videos as well, is a belt sander. So this is a really convenient way where you have this sandpaper that basically goes in a loop over and over again. And so all you have to do is walk up with your piece and that belt will very quickly sand it away. So that's kind of what I wanted to cover for belts. The key to being a good engineer is having a nice tool chest. And then if you have a problem, you can pick the right tool for the right job. In the same way that like wheels wouldn't be good for a snowmobile, belts really do make the most sense here. You probably wouldn't want a belt track system like this for your car on a highway where the roads are nice and smooth and paved. You just can't go as fast and it'll be really loud. So part of what I'm trying to do with Crunch Labs is just to expose you to all these different engineering solutions so that when you have to come up with your own clever solution, you have all the right tools in your tool chest ready to go. All right, so we're gonna get to the answer to our question of the day in just a moment, but first, I wanted to talk about the development of the duck for this portion of this box. It may seem just like a simple duck that knocks over, but there's some very clever engineering at play here, and to discuss it, I've got my buddy Mason here, who's actually the founding toy designer here at Crunch Labs. Mason, welcome.
Hi, how's it going?
You just snapped right in. Whenever I need you in the future, I'm just gonna snap now. That was fast. Mason, talk to us at the duck, because this is such a great peek behind the curtains, the type of engineering and the decisions that go into these boxes.
Absolutely. Yeah, this duck was really funny because it was maybe one of the hardest things that we've had to develop. As soon as we started prototyping, we ran into a huge wall. To simplify a duck, you can kind of think of a duck as just like a box shape, kind of like a rectilinear solid. And if you wanted to make a hinge that would secure that rectilinear solid to a belt that allows it to stand up and get knocked over and then go upside down and get reset, you would put it at the corner.
Put it in the corner. I put it in the corner.
So imagine you were looking at the duck like right in the eyes.
Yeah.
That means that you would put the hinge here. So I'll show you what happens. This stands up perfectly straight, which is great.
Yep.
That's one of the things it needs to do. When it gets knocked over, it stays down.
Great.
That's another thing that it needs to do. But I'll show you with this little roller here, if we attach this.
Okay. Starts up, I shoot it down.
It gets knocked over, that's good. Now, if we go back down, something weird starts to happen.
Yeah, it doesn't come quite straight, right?
It kind of hangs at a little bit of an angle. Okay, let's see if it corrects itself.
Doesn't
really work.
That's a problem.
That's weird, right? I would sum up the issue here with one word, which is center of mass. And in this case, you can see that the center of mass is hanging directly underneath the pivot. And that happens with a lot of things in life, with a swing set, with a grandfather clock. The natural state of rest is going to be right underneath the pivot. As soon as we got it here in real life, we see, hey, that doesn't work.
Yeah, don't put it in the corner then. We should just put it in the middle.
Wait a second, if we check, I can't knock it over. This is what we call over-constrained. Normally when you have a pivot, it allows something to spin around that pivot, it allows it to rotate. But if you have any sort of interference, now it can't spin. Now it's over-constrained. And in this case, we have these corners here that are kind of digging into the ground, and that's a problem. So it doesn't let it rotate. How could we change this?
I have a solution.
Yeah, that allows it to rotate.
Let's shave off the corners.
Let's shave off the corners, right? We get rid of the interference.
Okay.
Keep the pivot in the center. That should allow it to work. Let's give this a shot.
Okay.
Now I've got a pivot. I've got no corners.
It moves.
It still resets.
It's not over-constrained.
We retained that.
Okay.
We put it back up. Oh, it knocks over, but it didn't look like it was staying up for us.
Oh no.
Right, okay, so it's definitely not over-constrained.
Put the corners back.
It seems like those corners are really helpful for keeping it upright, but they're the exact opposite of what we need for it to be able to get knocked over.
Right.
So we were kind of at a crossroads, right? We needed the corners, but we also needed to get rid of the corners.
Yeah.
When it's upside down, we want it to be able to swing back and forth. We don't want the corners to interfere.
Yeah.
But when it's right side up, we want those corners to act as a stabilizer, as a stand. So what we did was, we took our hole for our axle and we turned it into a slot. We gave it a little bit of breathing room. So what does that allow us to do? Well, let me show you. When it's upside down, it hangs like it doesn't have any corners.
Yeah.
But when it's right side up, you can see it falls onto its corners.
That's cool. But it's still, and then if you need to reset it,
it falls back down. Right?
So beautiful.
So all it was we just changed the shape a little bit. We took a circle and we stretched it out, and that solved our problem.
This is such a great example of sometimes there's an amazing solution that totally works, but it's not that complicated. Like, you don't need all these wires and fancy mechanisms. These constraints breed creativity, and all you had to do was change a hole to a slot. Now you have this amazing mechanism that works, but like getting there was quite a treacherous road.
You need to really understand what makes up a hinge. And we think we encounter hinges all the time. We know exactly how they work. Until you really think about them from their building blocks, from their foundation, you can't really get to the actual solution. Our hinge is actually better than the original hinge. Do you know why? Because with an original hinge, it only gets knocked over one way. It couldn't be a two-player game.
Sure.
But now with this one, it can go both ways. You can play it from this side, you can play it from that side.
Nothing makes me more excited and happy than like a simple, clever solution to a difficult problem. And that's what we did here, so I wanted to pull back the curtain, bring Mason here. Thank you, Mason.
Thanks for having me.
Get back to work.
All right.
Get out of here. And now for the answer to our question of the day: how do you turn a corner with one of those flat conveyor belts? Again, the issue is like somehow this part of the conveyor belt needs to be moving faster at the edge than this one. So how do you do that? If you're thinking real smart, it doesn't have to be a cylinder like this. What if you had something sort of like this that was tapered, like a candle is, or like a cup? Because now if I spin this cup and I'm an ant here, versus an ant here, it's a little bit more of a wild ride on this edge of the cup than this one, because I'm farther away from the center, right? Because in one rotation, this is traveling a bigger distance. And if you go farther in the same amount of time, that's the definition of velocity. It's speed. You're going faster. So basically, I drew this out beforehand. That roller on the end of the curved portion isn't a cylinder like this. It's tapered kind of like a cone like this. And the belt is just sort of a half circle. Because if you sew that together and folded it over, you have this belt like this. And now because you have a conical roller here, this satisfies our constraints. And as long as this end of the cone is, say, for example, twice as big as this one, in the same way that this distance is twice as far from the center as this one is, then it's going to roll perfectly and you won't have any slippage on the belt. So next time you see that at the airport, you can be like, I know exactly how that works. All right, so now we'll cover how to put it together. As usual, you can either watch this video and just pause it, or you could use the paper instructions or some combination thereof. I'll do this in about 4 minutes. It'll probably take you anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour. First, find a yellow wooden duck piece, a blue foam duck piece, and 2 blue rivets. From the bottom, insert both blue rivets into the yellow wooden duck piece. Then from above, slide the blue foam duck piece over the exposed rivets. Next, grab one blue plastic hinge and slide the hinge into the slit in the middle of the duck pieces. Then grab one small wooden dowel and slide the small wooden dowel into the slot in the blue foam. Now grab another yellow wooden duck piece and snap it on top of the 2 blue rivets. Then repeat steps 1 through 4 in the same order to make a second duck. Now find the dark blue fabric belt and 2 short white elastic cords. Use the short elastic cords to attach the ducks to the belt. Start by threading an elastic cord through the holes in the belt, then thread that same elastic through the matching holes in the duck's plastic hinge. Now repeat this step for the second duck and double check that they're facing the same direction. Next, grab 3 more short white elastic cords and thread each of the 3 cords through each of the 3 holes at the end of the fabric belt. Now locate the yellow DC motor and the matching blue adhesive foam. Peel and stick the adhesive foam over the yellow DC motor shaft, then peel off the remaining adhesive backing. Now find the wood frame piece that has etching that matches the outline of the DC motor. Then stick the DC motor to the wood frame, making sure the DC motor lines up with the corresponding etching. Now grab one black elastic cord and slide the black elastic cord through the 2 holes in the DC motor. Make sure both tips come out on the other side of the wood frame. This will secure it in place. Now locate 1 yellow standoff and 1 white bolt. For the bottom of the wood frame, insert the white bolt through the small hole. Then secure it in place by screwing the yellow standoff down on top of it. Now find the small wood brace and 1 white O-ring. From the bottom, slide the wood brace into the center slit in the wood frame, then secure it in place by stretching the white O-ring over the exposed tab. Next, find the large wood brace and the 2 white O-rings. From the bottom, slide the large wood brace into the 2 remaining wood slits, then secure both exposed tabs with the 2 white O-rings. Now grab the 2 blue plastic rollers and the 2 rubber bands. Stretch both rubber bands into the notches on one of the 2 rollers. This roller will be our drive roller, which means it needs more friction. Pro tip: friction in the right place is actually a good thing. These rollers use rubber bands to give them more friction or more grip. That way they can turn the belt more easily. And here's a quick demo to show what I mean. You can see here how without the rubber bands, the rollers can't move the paper, but with the rubber bands, there's enough friction to do so. Now flip your belt over so that the yellow DC motor is facing down. Grab the roller that has the rubber bands and slide it down over the exposed DC motor shaft. Then place the remaining roller into the opposite hole on the other side of the build. Next, find the other wood frame that has the Crunch Labs logo on it and 3 more white O-rings. Pick up the wood frame with the Crunch Labs logo and fit it over the wood tabs as well as the blue rollers. This can be a little tricky, so take your time and make sure everything lines up. Then stretch all 3 O-rings over all 3 tabs to lock everything in place. Now find 1 yellow standoff and 1 white bolt. From the bottom, insert the white bolt through the small hole in the wood frame, then secure it in place by screwing the yellow standoff down on top of it. Next, locate a black elastic cord. From the top, insert each end of the cord through the small holes in the wooden brace. Now grab your fabric belt with the ducks on it. Wrap the belt around each of the 2 rollers and use the white elastic cords to attach both ends of the belt to each other. Now locate the battery pack and the matching adhesive foam. Remove the clear plastic safety tab from the battery pack. Then peel and stick the adhesive foam to the side of the battery pack that has the on-off switch. Then peel off the other paper backing as well. Now stick the battery pack to the inside of the wood frame so the on-off switch is visible from the front. Then tuck both of the battery pack wires through the hole in the wood frame so that they come out the front of the build. Then route the wires through the hole underneath the DC motor so that they come out the back of the build. Then connect the battery pack wires to the DC motor wires, of course making sure to connect the red wire to the red wire and the black wire to the black wire. Now it's time for a test. Flip your battery pack to the on position and watch what happens. You should see your belt start to rotate. Now try knocking over some of the ducts, and just like we talked, notice how they cleverly stand themselves back up. Now locate the 2 blue plastic chambers as well as the matching adhesive foam, and peel and stick the adhesive foam onto the chambers. Now grab the blue and red score counters, then peel and stick the score counters to the blue plastic chambers. Now locate 1 metal marble, 1 clear plastic window, a wooden washer, and a white bolt. Slide the red score counter over the yellow standoff, then place the metal marble into the blue plastic chamber. Next, place the clear window onto the blue plastic chamber, slide the white bolt into the wood washer, and then screw the bolt into the yellow standoff, and this will secure everything into place. Now rotate the build around, grab another metal marble, a clear plastic window, a wooden washer, and a white bolt. Again, slide the blue score counter over the yellow standoff, then place the metal marble into the blue plastic chamber. Now place the clear window onto the blue plastic chamber, slide the white bolt into the wood washer, and then screw the bolt into the yellow standoff. Again, this will secure everything into place. And there you go! Turn on your conveyor belt again, and now when you knock over one of the ducts, it will hit the score counter rotating at 90 degrees, which is just a delightful passive way to keep score. If you notice that your belt is slipping, you can add more tension by stretching one of the extra white O-rings over the middle elastic cord. That should keep your belt running a bit more smoothly. For the engineering hustle then, I think we either go with the question of the day. So how do you get a conveyor belt to turn the corner? So maybe if you're at the airport and you see one of the flat conveyor belts and it's turning a corner, you can ask your buddy or your sibling or your parent, how does that work? And remember, the answer is the roller on the end. It's not a cylinder, it's a cone, it's conical. Or maybe you go with the duck question, like Mason talked about here. It's such a clever, simple solution. How do you get a duck that can actually right itself when it comes back around? Of course, the answer there is that the hole is not a circle, it's actually an oval, it's a slot. And if you change that to a slot, it magically makes everything work. Such a simple, clever solution. All right, well, good job today. As usual, I want to remind you that engineering is an iterative process. It's all about failing. These are many of the prototypes, but not even close to all of the prototypes we made to arrive at the final version of Duck. You can see at one point we had like a ratchet here. That was like keeping score. We had like a semicircle action. Some of these had 2 motors. This was a paper version for keeping score. We tried at the beginning. Bunch of variations of the ducks like Mason talked about. The point is you never arrive at the final solution just by drawing it on paper a bunch. You gotta get your hands dirty and make and build and test some stuff. So what can you do to take this to the next level? One thing I think is really exciting is as the 2-player game, if you don't use the party blowers, maybe you and your buddy can both have Nerf guns and you try and hit the ducks from either side. Maybe you use your disc launcher and see how many seconds it takes you to get 4 points by trying to shoot the ducks as they go by with the disc launcher, or really anything. I mean, this is like a carnival game with the ducks going by that resets, that keeps score. There's so many different ways you can make a fun competition out of this, either with someone else or just yourself. Either way, no matter what you do, make sure that you work with your parents, post it online, tag us at Crunch Labs, because nothing makes me happier than seeing these being used in the wild and the very clever, creative things that you guys do to take these to the next level, or just to have fun with them as they're intended. Okay, well that's it. You have now earned your gear badge for belts, so you can go put it together, have some fun, create your very own shooting gallery in your own house, and go nuts with it. And then I'll catch you again next month, right here at Crunch Labs. Oh, and if you're watching this and you haven't yet ordered your BuildBox subscription from Crunch Labs, then what the heck are you waiting for? Visit crunchlabs.com with a parent, and once you're there, you can learn more about how it all works. Thanks for watching.